Hello there, and welcome back. I'm Dawn Westmoreland, hailing from Asheville, North Carolina, the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains. I am your talk host, and the show is called The Empowered Whistleblower. It's about blowing the whistle on things that empower people in this world. If you know anything about my past, I am retired from the Air Force, and I have also been all about empowerment and resiliency. And I can't tell you how excited I am about this show. When I met Malissa Smith, and found out that she was into boxing. She was an author, women's boxing historian and public speaker. I'm like, I've got to get to know this lady. She's a pioneer. And I know that because, for years I followed boxing. I actually got to see Sweet Pea in San Antonio many years ago box. And I was like, wow, this is something else. But women have been held back for so long. I went in the Air Force in 1985 and I was issued combat boots. I was one of the first women, but yet I could wear these boots, but I could not really fulfill those boots, if you know what I mean. So I want to welcome Malissa Smith. Hello, Melissa. How are you today?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you so much, Dawn, for having me on the show.
So happy that you're on the show. And the show airs every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone. And because it's part of the Pacific Network and syndicated, you may hear it at other days and other times. So, Melissa, you started out as what some people might call a late bloomer. At 42, something significant happened that you shared with me, and I'd love to share that with our listeners.
Well, I had been a boxing fan all my life since I was a little kid, but it took me until I was 40 till I realized that I could actually walk into a gym and do it myself, sort of rev up the courage. And that was in January of 1997. And I started to learn the sweet science of boxing.
I
And since then have sort of developed that as a passion in terms of telling stories of the women that I met in the gym.
And I understand that it was in 2010 that women could compete in boxing in the Olympics.
Actually, it was in 2012 was the
Oh, I
first
was off
time that,
2 years.
yeah, we're able to compete in the Olympics. There's a funny story about that, which is in 1904 at the St. Louis Exposition, which is where the Olympics were held that year. It was only the second modern Olympics, or I'm sorry, the third modern Olympics. Women actually put on an exhibition bout of boxing. Um, but it took a further 108 years to actually put it on as a sport in the Olympics. The last sport to have female as well as male competitors.
Amazing. Why do you think it took so long for women to be allowed to box?
Well, I theorize that we think of boxing as a very masculine or sort of hyper masculine sport. Certainly, if we look back into the history of our own popular culture in the United States, we look at the film genre for boxing films, and it's always a story about a guy who's coming up from nowhere, who fights through his own demons and is able to get into the ring and become a champion, and therefore fulfill not only his own sense of himself and his own empowerment as a man, but stand in for all the people watching from the sidelines cheering him on. There's also a lot of martial association with boxing, and it's interesting. So for instance, all the service academies um, have boxing programs as part of their training and as part of their developing competitive spirit, just even as students in the service academies. So boxing, I think, very much imbues that. So when women's have, believe me, for 300 years, put on the gloves to fight, it's always had a real complex relationship to how people feel about it in popular culture, and it's kind of ebbed and flowed. Our first real big spurt of boxing in the United States was in the 70s when women sued for the right to box. They said, wait a minute,
They,
equal rights, honey. I want to box professionally. And, because of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the codicil that President Johnson put in to say, oh, and women, they were successful. So we had a real spurt of boxing professionally in the 70s. It even showed up on television. Then it kind of went into the toilet. But women continued to box through the 80s. And then in the mid 90s, a woman by the name of Christy Martin made history on when she fought an Irish fighter named Deirdre Gogarty on a pay-per-view fight that had Mike Tyson and Frank Bruno as the main event. And yet they were the fight of the night, and Christy Martin ended up on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And so women have been more in the spotlight as competitive professional boxers since then. And by the early 2000s, the major sanctioning bodies started to recognize them. So they have been in our consciousness. It's just every single generation of fighter is still known as a trailblazer because there are still so many hurdles for these women to follow.
And kudos to every one of those women who, we may not want to be a boxer. I've never boxed, and there's probably lots of women out there that have never boxed, have no desire, but it's the resiliency. And I want to talk about that, Melissa, because you are a resilient woman and you're out there lifting other women and sharing their stories of resiliency. What does somebody get, like a woman who's boxing, what does she get out of the boxing other than the physical part of it?
Well, I think there's a real mental component, and this is whether you're a boxer like me. I call myself a Saturday boxer.
Oh, I love it.
I'm not a competitor, I'm not interested in winning world championships. For me, even if I'm training 3 or 4 days a week, my motivation is my own health, my own well-being, but also my psychic well-being, my mental well-being. Because what I have found in my own journey in the sport is that you can't lie when you box. You can't fake it. You really have to be committed 100%. And that means looking into oneself. And for me, the experience of hitting a bag was almost like hitting myself, because it forced me to really look into some truths and open up the scars, and took quite a journey through that process of recognizing my own trauma. And then out of that, a healing process that still continues to this day. There were many times I would be banging on the bag and just tears would be flowing out of my eyes. I was like, what is this coming from? And I realized it's just that there's a truth to being able to be powerful. And I'm of a generation, I'm turning 70 this year, where we were not allowed to do anything. It's like sports. And I grew up in New York. Our sports was like punchball and Newcomb. I mean, there were no sports. You swam if there was a swimming pool in your high school. But more to the point, we were never allowed to show our aggression, never allowed to show our own physical empowerment. So by being on a boxing bag, there's an opportunity for women of any age to really express themselves physically. It's like a pounding sport. You're banging and banging and banging, and it really releases things. I guess running is something similar, because you're pounding the pavement, you're pounding the track. But there's something about connecting to a bag, but also learning the technique and being able to master how to throw a jab, how to throw a hook, learning the lexicon of the sport. And then finally, for me, I found community that I never expected I would find. Community among the trainers and the people who come to box, and really began to appreciate the journey of the women who were in the gym, who were determined to make a mark, whether as amateur competitors or as professional competitors. And that's what led me to following a path to become a women's boxing historian, which led me to go back to college and finish my bachelor's degree when I was 56, and then getting a master's in liberal studies at 58, and doing a thesis on women's boxing. And then from there, I had the opportunity to publish my first book, A History of Women's Boxing, which remains the only history of the sport, which the Ring magazine calls the Bible of women's boxing. So it's really sweet of them. And I was turning 60 when I did that. So I'm also here to say our journey can take us to places where we can take our passions and live our passions and continue to create.
I am so thankful to you that you're vulnerable, transparent, because I love that. I try to do that myself because it gives other people permission, and it definitely builds a bond and a trust when somebody can be real and raw. Thank you for sharing that. And I don't think you're ever too old to go to school. My grandmother started college after raising 5 children and going through the depression, started college basically at 50 years old and got her PhD in almost record time. So we're never too old, are we? And
No, we're not.
congratulations on your milestone. That's a big deal. Turning 70 this year. I just turned 60 last month. And gosh, you look at your wisdom, because right now you're a mentor. I mean, you are a mentor to so many people. Imagine not just women. I imagine there are a lot of men who look up to you for what you're doing.
Well, that's very sweet of you to say. I do have a mentoring role. I always have in my own world of work outside of the boxing ring, but I mentor other writers. I'm part of a very supportive community of boxing writers, of podcasters who deal with boxing, but more to the point of just people who come into the gym and who, in seeing me continue to box, feel inspired or feel that they have permission to continue in their journey. I laugh. My trainer is older than me, and we crack up because we're in the ring. It's like the Alta are here, but we do our thing. So,
Yeah.
and I feel really privileged to have that opportunity to be able to have the physical capacity to continue to train and to more to the point have touchstones again with women who compete at very high levels, some just to win their first amateur fight, and be able to again examine their journey. And in my newest book, The Promise of Women's Boxing, A Momentous New Era for the Sweet Science, I look at what happened since that momentous week when they first went into the Olympics at 2012. How did that inspire other women in the sport? Did it have an impact? Were they suddenly given opportunities for promotions? Were they able to appear on cards? Were they getting paid? Because they were not getting
Trying to
paid.
get paid.
Is there pay equity? And the answer is it's mixed. Some women have done very well, like Clarissa Shields, who is our America's just amazing female boxer. She's won 2 back-to-back gold medals in the 2012 and 2016 Olympics, the only American boxer to have ever repeated a gold medal. And she is also a 3-time undisputed champion. That means that there are 3 times when she has won all of the belts in a weight class. That is also the only person, male or female, to have done that. The first person to have done that as a male or female. So she's an extraordinary person, and also has had this amazing journey. She was born in Flint, Michigan, had a really, really traumatic childhood. The kind of childhood that if you read about it, you kind of go, how did she even live?
Mhm.
How was she able to exist at all? But there was some inner fortitude for her that brought her to boxing. And then when she became a boxer at the age of 11, instilled in her an opportunity to better herself and to become her best self and win her a place in the Olympics at the age of 17, which is extraordinary.
And
Then to win a gold medal at the age of 17 and to continue in that sport. So I love that I'm able to tell her story, or tell the story of Michaela Mayer, another Olympian who grew up in Los Angeles as a sort of statuesque blonde, very beautiful, and one would look at her and think, oh, boxer, what are you kidding? Or just make assumptions about her life. And yet she was a troubled teenager that was really skirting the margins of real trouble. And coming into boxing is what brought her an opportunity to work through that trauma and to focus on something, to become disciplined. to become an Olympian in 2016 and to become a world champion in 2 weight classes today. So boxing has a space for many, many different women. There are women who are attorneys, women who are doctors and architects and all sorts of walks of life who have come into the sport as competitors to realize their own opportunities and to empower themselves in a sport that can be very unforgiving. Let's just be honest about that, but also gives them an opportunity to fulfill dreams that they may never have known they had.
Those stories just gave me chills, and I can imagine that the people who heard those stories also were like, wow, maybe they never heard of these women. It's just amazing. And stories of people overcoming, women overcoming, not just surviving, but thriving. Those are the kind of people that we can learn from. I don't care what age, what culture. Those are the people that are mentors to us. And I always say, you know, you're always on parade. You never know who's watching you. You never know who you're going to inspire. You may never know what that person's going to do because he heard you, she heard you, or saw you on an event. What do you hope in the future for women's boxing?
Well, again, I what I'm hopeful for is equity and in opportunity, um, which means many things. It means being recognized as talents and being promoted appropriately, being given opportunities to just box and not have to work all day, then go to the gym to train, and then have an opportunity to fight in a fight. Um, Opportunities for consistency in promotion, which is something that also does not exist. I'll give you an example. Heather Hardy, who's from New York, she grew up in Gerritsen Beach, which is a small community within the borough of Brooklyn, working class family, Irish as Irish can be, and went to college, got her degree in criminology, got married young, had a baby, was in an abusive relationship,
Mm,
had suffered a sexual assault,
mm.
somehow through that continued to persevere, found herself in a kickboxing gym as someone gave her a gift. Hey, take some kickboxing lessons. Start and then discovered in that a competitive spirit. Sort of won her first competition, even though she didn't even know what she was doing. Out of that, her journey took her to Gleason's Gym, the world-renowned Gleason's Gym in downtown Brooklyn, which was where I trained. And she began training. Her first trainer was a woman named Alicia Ashley, who's one of the early pioneer champions with the World Boxing Council, which is a major sanctioning body, and started to train, then switched her trainers and started to win as an amateur, even became a national champion. From there, she had thought about the Olympics, but didn't have enough of experience as an amateur to compete.
Mhm.
So at the time of the 2012 Olympics, she had her debut as a professional fighter.
Mm.
It's like a week before. It was really just the synergy of that is miraculous. She fought, she was hit, she went down in the first round. She got it, she was knocked down, jumps up, says, "Oh my God, I am not losing."
That's the
Killed
spirit.
her opponent for the next
Yes.
3 rounds, wins the fight, and the promoter of the fight, a man named Lou DiBello, who has really pioneered in promoting women's bouts, actually signed her to a contract, and so she was off to the races as a fighter. However,
Fantastic.
that was great, but what she was earning was $3,000 for a fight, $4,000 for a fight, $2,000 for a fight, and it comes to like to the point where she was making a name for herself. But when she did have a fight, and she's a single mom, I should add that she left a deadbeat husband, is a
Mm,
single mom raising her daughter, and for her, having a fight meant adding the extra hours in the day
mhm.
to be able to train. So camp was coming into the gym an hour earlier. By then she was working as a trainer. Camp meant coming into the gym an hour, 2 hours earlier, dragging her daughter with her, who's like half asleep. Okay, here, park, sit over here, eat your breakfast. Training for herself before her clients came, running out, getting her daughter to school, coming back, training her clients, and then adding the other hour or two to the day to go on her runs, to do her cardio workouts and all the rest. So that is, in a nutshell, what many women have to do in order to stay in the sport. Now, some men also do that, but for women, it is predominantly the story. There are very, very few women who are competitive today who can just box. Most of them have to have some kind of side gig, some kind of way of earning a living, because they're not going to earn a living that's consistent from boxing.
And that is really, really good to know. So when you were talking about this lady bringing her child, what I heard was, resistancy, stick to itness, and she's doing so great now. So I want to switch things up and ask you this. Okay, there's probably people that are really inspired by what you're talking about, boxing, what you get out of boxing, the mental well-being, the social part of it, the culture, the tribe, belonging and such. But I mean, we are in the United States where, what is it, more than half the people are overweight. So if somebody wanted to, they're struggling, they're a little overweight, they're out of shape, and they want to start. Maybe they don't want to box, but they want to be in better shape. Can you give some suggestions where to start at?
Absolutely. I mean, there are, you don't have to, first of all, you don't have to walk into some kind of hardcore boxing gym. What you can start to do is, first of all, you have to make a commitment to yourself. And even if it means you're going to walk 1 block if you're living in a city, or you're going to walk a little bit down your road if you're living somewhere rural, and then walk back. That's a start. That's the beginning of that commitment. Then from that 1 block, you can walk 4, and suddenly you feel a little more of that energy, or you start to jog. You can do it slowly, and you can check out, oh, my knees hurt, my back hurts, my this hurt, my that. That's okay. Push through it. Maybe run 10 steps, walk 10 steps, run 10 steps, walk 10 steps. The point is to start to get your heart moving, to start to get your body moving, and realizing, wow, I can meet these achievable goals. And that's part of it. Set down what that goal is and do it in chunks. You don't have to run a marathon the first time you decide to take up running. Run a block, run 2 blocks. That's okay. But do it the next day and the next day and the next day, and set those goals for yourself. In terms of hitting the bag, I can't think of anything better to do. There is like, work it out on the bag, honey. Just hit it. It feels good to get out tension as a way of just releasing your own sense of frustration, if nothing else. But it's also a way of starting to learn some skills. Again, you don't have to become a professional boxer. You don't have to be spar in the ring. You don't have to become an amateur and work towards the golden gloves if you don't want to. What you can do is start to learn some skills, start to finesse your own body, and learn how to throw a jab so that it's straight, so that you're turning your fist, so that you're hitting the bag properly. And that's an incredible accomplishment for anybody, and especially for women who have been told so often, you can't, you shouldn't, why are you doing this? I mean, even today, this is where we are, is all the knots. So the do's are, do seek it out. Do find a gym in your neighborhood. Do find a class. A boxercise class is a great way to start. You're doing cardio and you're starting to learn some of the language for boxing, some of the moves for boxing, and then you can take it to the next step where you're actually in a gym that has things like a punching, a big heavy bag that you can punch, and learning how to do that, or working with a trainer who will patiently show you the ropes, how to throw and execute these, and starting to really, as I said, learn the lexicon and train your body to feel confident in doing these movements.
So very good. And as we wrap up, this time goes by so quick when it's such a great guest and such an interesting subject. I would like you to tell the listeners where they can find out more about you. Also, your book. You can pre-order your book, I understand, and I definitely want to get that book. Could you?
Yes, happy to. My book is again, The Promise of Women's Boxing, a Momentous New Era in the Sweet Science. It's available for pre-order on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, and other sites like that. You can also go on the publisher's website, Roman and Littlefield Publishers, and you can pre-order it that way, or you can come to my website and pre-order it through there. I am also active on social media. My handle is at Girl Boxing Now. You'll find me on Twitter. I'm doing live tweets of boxing matches and things like that. I'm also on Instagram, where I have more of my personal journey about the book, about my exploits in the gym. I'll have photos of me or videos of me trying to do things. Some things I'm good at, like speed bag, I have to say I'm pretty darn good. But other things like, are you kidding me? What was that I just saw? So there is that opportunity, and of course, opportunities to communicate directly with me if you're interested. Thank you.
No, so they can find you. I know how to spell your name, but we might want to spell your name out for the people who don't know you, because it's not Melissa with an E, it's with an A.
That's right. It's Malissa, Malissa, last name Smith. And you, as I said, you can find both of my books. You can pre-order The Promise of Women's Boxing, or order A History of Women's Boxing, again, in those same outlets. Amazon, Barnes and Noble are two of the big ones, but there are other smaller bookstores. And if you can't afford the premium price, certainly for the older book, you can find it used at places like Abe. I'm most interested in getting the stories out, and in that book, I examined 300 years of women, and how women have touched the sport of boxing.
So is it like an anthology of stories?
It's a history that starts in the 1700s and comes all the way up to today. Each chapter kind of looks at different eras, and what the meaning was. I also place women in boxing in the context of the culture at the time, because we can't we can't put our lens on how women were viewed in the early 1700s. Women had different places. We had different concepts of gender in the early 1700s. Same thing in the 1800s, different concepts.
Yeah.
So I, again, try to place it within the cultural context, and show how the impact of other sports, such as riding the bicycle, was a revolution for women.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes, yes.
I talk about things like that in the book.
Melissa, it's been such a pleasure, and I'm glad to get to know you better. You're an inspiration. I definitely want to pre-order your book, and I hope the listeners do too. And if you're trying to look for Melissa, remember Malissa Smith. You can Google her. There's probably not too many people out there with your name. And I'd like to give a shout out to our radio station owner, Davine Dial, because when I first started doing this, Davine is a very sophisticated, tough woman in her own right, very talented. She's made jewelry, all kind of metal art and stuff. And she wanted me to portray, people like you, Melissa, who are tough, but you don't have to be tough and be the B word. I mean, we get picked on so much. But a shout out to Davine Dial and this opportunity to be a radio talk host. Melissa, take care. I'm going to be following you for a long time. Listeners, I hope you follow too. Stay empowered. We'll see you next time. And be sure to follow Melissa on social media. And I'd be happy if you did too with me. Be well and stay empowered.